Lately, I've been noticing that there is this change of direction coming through for me, and maybe you've been noticing this too. And I don't really quite understand it, but it feels like something just no longer fits. This solar eclipse in Aquarius feels less like an answer to that question or that problem, and more like a beginning of learning to move through what naturally arises, even if we don't fully understand it. And there could even be like this sense of like a restlessness or a detachment from our old identities or a disconnection with our old goals, recognizing that the old version of ourselves that has carried us thus far is not the version of us that wants to continue. So in this video, we're going to look at this solar eclipse from this lens. And of course, we'll do that through the lens of astrology and human design, the Sabian symbol, and just talking about some of these archetypes and how they could be showing up in our lives right now. Astrology is amazing for looking at cycles and seeing what this is bringing up. And this solar eclipse in Aquarius is the first eclipse in this cycle. Eclipses happen when the new moon or full moon, in this case the new moon, are aligned with the nodes. But if you are aware of the astrological sky, that's interesting because the nodes have not yet moved into Aquarius and Leo. So this is starting about a 2-year process where we're going to have eclipses in this sign, in these signs, Leo and Aquarius, even though the nodes haven't quite moved there yet, which I think is adding to the sense that there is a change of direction that wants to come through, but we're not really sure why or what that's going to look like. And we're really being asked to trust in the unfoldment of this process. And in this day and age, that can be difficult when things feel destabilizing or it feels like, yeah, a lot of things are crumbling beneath us. So, without further ado, let's take a look at this chart. Now, this solar eclipse is happening in the sign of Aquarius, as I've mentioned, on February 17th, very early in the morning, Mountain Standard Time, around 5 a.m. So adjust for your time zone. As you can see here, it is at 28 degrees of Aquarius. Now, the sun and the moon both being in Aquarius is what makes this a new moon. And then, as I said, the proximity to the nodes, even though they're not necessarily in the same sign, is what makes it an eclipse. I've noticed with solar eclipses specifically, they tend to really have a collective hit. We tend to feel it not just personally, but it tends to reverberate into the collective more prominently than lunar eclipses. And so we can kind of see how this is all coming to a head. And we notice that this new moon, this solar eclipse, is squaring Uranus in Taurus, uh, almost exactly within 1 degree. This is really prominent because Uranus is one of the two rulers of Aquarius. Aquarius has a traditional ruler of Saturn who has just moved into Aries when this happens. February 17th is crazy, this solar eclipse, because there's a lot of movement happening around this time. Saturn, its traditional ruler, moves into Aries and is joined with Neptune. That conjunction will be exact on February 20th. And then the other ruler is squaring it, providing some tension with this new moon, this solar eclipse, urging us or bringing about this suddenness, this disruptive nature of something's got to change. Uranus is also the great awakener, right? So we can have insights, but because it's a square, it can be quite shocking to the system. And the sun and the moon are the two luminaries. They're very, very important parts of the chart. They're very, very important parts of the sky. So when we think about the sun being like a core essence of the self, and the moon and the identity and the conscious personality, the conscious knowing of self, the ego in that way, and the moon being our emotional innermost identification, they're both being disrupted by Uranus and Taurus. And what is Taurus? Our values, money, finances. Let's talk a little bit about the Aquarian archetype before we go too deep into this. Now, if you watched my last video on the Aquarius stellium, I did talk about that a little bit, but there are so many different significators of each sign, and we don't always get a chance to talk about every single one, right? So last time it was a lot about talking about the systems that are currently being dismantled, and this is coming through collectively and not just in astrology, but in human design. I really plan to make a video about this soon. I've made one in the past about this global cycle change. I mention it briefly in my videos because it's so important, and it's happening starting February 2027, and it really has a lot to do with dismantling of systems. So my energy has been so focused with my one-on-one clients and my group programs, and I've really been allowing that to happen because I am moving through a certain rhythm of my life and my business right now. And I recently mentioned how I'm going to be stepping away from doing one on one work starting in May. And this kind of really embodies for me this change in direction with this lunation that's coming up, which is Uranus in my 10th house of career, squaring the solar eclipse in my 7th house, how I work with other people. Interesting, right? So this is how it could be coming up for you. Like something is really asking for a change of direction, and it may not make sense to you right now, but there's a desire forming it. So let's talk a little bit about Aquarius from some other perspectives. Aquarius is about the collective and the systems, a lot of systems, in fact. Aquarius is generally this original thinker, this independent thinker. We hear the word independent associated to a lot of different signs, which are absolutely true. Here with Aquarius, because it's an air sign, it tends to use that originality and that independence towards thought. Freedom of thought becomes very, very important when we're talking about Aquarius. It is also a fixed air sign, so there's a quality of persistence or stubbornness on the maybe more shadow side of that. This is a sign of a humanitarian, the person who really values freedom. And as I mentioned, especially freedom of thought. There's a detachedness, the sun does not really like being in Aquarius because it's naturally ruled by Saturn, and the sun and Saturn aren't the best of friends. But also, the sun is the king, and Aquarius rules more of the common man. And so there can be this detachment or the dislocation of the sense of self into the what's happening in the collective or with humanity. So there's a displacement of the ego in that way. There's a displacement of the identity, which can feel rather uncomfortable for us. But what I think is amazing when the sun is in Aquarius is that it allows us to have enough detachment from our sense of self to be the observer and see what is working and what is not working. And this square from Uranus is going to make that even more abundantly clear in a lot of ways. So that's a little bit about Aquarius and how it could be showing up in our lives right now. As I mentioned, I really do plan on talking about Saturn. I mean, I don't plan on it. I will be talking about Saturn and Neptune in Aries more. I've talked about it briefly as well. However, Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries begins a 36-year cycle. So this is something we're going to be dealing with, even though Saturn only stays in a sign for 2 to 3 years. We're going to be dealing with these themes for the next 36 years. So this is not something to rush the understanding. There's so many different ways to think about this. And in a lot of ways, Saturn is our sense of responsibility. And Aries is selfhood. So we are really being asked to step into responsibility of selfhood. Saturn is slow. Aries is fast. This makes us very prone to reacting from impulsions. This lunar eclipse, I'm sorry, the solar eclipse is also happening in gate 30 in human design, which is the gate of feeling. And we actually have the full channel, this channel of fantasy. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the reason why I'm saying that is because this can also be a very impulsive thing. It can be very flippant in that we follow our desires all the time and nothing really has any staying power. That's not what's being asked of us right now. And the only true way that you can know what is impulse and what is true desire is by staying with the body long enough and consistently enough to know and feel the difference in your body. This is really what I work with. My deeper work, I love astrology, I love human design, but I'm more interested about the intersection of esoteric tools and the nervous system. As many of you guys know, I've gone through a lot of transformations in my life. I've healed a lot of autoimmune disorders, a lot of mental health disorders, emotional issues as well. Anyone who has autoimmune disorders knows the mental health and the emotional health naturally get tied up to that. Chronic pain. I've left my career as a pharmacist. I've done none of these things without true embodiment, which includes not just awareness of patterns, but the awareness of patterns and simultaneously creating safety physiologically to be able to move differently, right? This is the where a lot of people get stuck when we hear the word embodiment and we're like, okay, I just need to live my chart. How do I actually do that beyond conceptual awareness? How do I actually do that when my body says no? When I have chronic pain, when I have anxiety, all of these things. This is the intersection of my work and how all of my work is really integrated within a revolution immersion. That current program I'm running. It's closed out for this cohort, but if you're interested, I'll have the waitlist for the next cohort down below. I'm teaching it in a very body first way. I've never been taught anything like this, so it's really cool. Anyway, Saturn, Saturn taking responsibility over the self, understanding this, what does it mean to be an individual without losing that sense of interdependence and connection, right? Because on February 17th, when we have the solar eclipse, it's also the same day that we have a lunar new year. And we're moving away from the year of the snake into the year of the horse, the fire horse specifically, which I briefly talked about in my numerology for this year video, I think. I also have a Thrive Through 2026 bundle that I talked more about this. But the fire horse is very impulsive. It's also very independent. And yet we need connection more than others. So how do we value these two things? Saturn will be showing us, especially because Neptune's there, right? And Neptune is transcendence of the self. So it's really interesting because we're being asked to like fully inhabit the self and take responsibility for it while also maintaining a connection to something bigger than ourselves, to some spiritual ideal. Creativity, right? I think creativity is going to be huge moving into the Saturn Neptune. So I'll leave that there, and knowing that we're going to discuss this much deeper when I make these videos about Saturn and Neptune. But this eclipse specifically really feels like this place where there's a new chapter and desire is changing before our identity catches up. So the work is learning to let that change happen without trying to grasp and rush to define what that new identity is. Some other things to just note here: Venus is exactly conjunct the North Node in Pisces, which means that it's opposing the South Node. So Venus is exalted here, and Mercury is in Pisces as well, debilitated. So our mind is being asked to go offline, okay? And our desire is asking to lead the way, but it's in Pisces. We have to trust something. We have to trust our intuition. We have to trust the desires, even if it doesn't make logical sense. Mercury. Does the current life that you have support your values and the desires, the goals that you have? I think a lot of us right now are becoming disillusioned by past desires or dissatisfied with past desires, and maybe even feeling like if you don't know what that desire is, even if you're like, Jess, I have no idea, like I had this inner calling. The reason why I stopped doing, or I'm taking a pause from one-on-ones, is because I had this inner knowing for a while, for a couple of months, that kept coming up through my body. That was like, your energy is going through it wants to be allocated to this a new creative endeavor, and I don't know what that endeavor is, but I trust it, right? It's not because, I mean, I absolutely love doing one-on-one work. I'm actually having to grieve that in a lot of ways. But there was a knowing that I didn't want to keep investing in this right now. I don't even know what this investment looks like going forward, but I don't want to invest in this thing right now. That's what my body is saying. So from that perspective, just allow allow yourself to take the time to let this desire take form. It's not, I don't think it's going to be very clear. Solar eclipses in general don't always come with clarity, especially solars, because it's a new moon, right? The full moons, the lunar eclipses, we tend to have this big realization. With this one, it might be more quiet for us in that way. But if you have no idea, instead look at what is no longer growing. What is requiring a lot of investment and effort for you to maintain. That might give you a clue as to where this change in direction is coming from. That this thing is just no longer working. So even if you don't know what you're moving toward, you at least know what you're moving away from. Okay, that's where this overlap is really happening. Is this current direction that you're in still worth the energy that you're investing into it? This is the chart for this solar eclipse. And then we'll take a look at it from this perspective because it is easier to see all of the gates and all of this stuff. So this is happening in gate 30, the gate of fantasy, or I'm sorry, the gate of feeling or desire. But we have the full channel here. My microphone is in the way of my iPad, so um that's why my lines are all squiggly, because I'm like trying to do it like in a weird way. I could move my iPad. How about that? You know, sometimes we keep ourselves stuck in these silly ways, you know? I'm like, oh, I can't circle this because I might, and it's like, well, why don't we move the iPad? This is such a beautiful application to this energy. Like, this energy is kind of very shadowy, and it comes up that, you know, when I do my one-on-one work, comes up so often. Like, where do we keep ourselves stuck? Right? Like, well, this is the way I've always done it, and this is why I think it's so important to work with the nervous system, because the nervous system, our physiology, will always choose the familiar over growth. But yes, yet so much of our life is about moving toward growth. So how do we kind of bridge that gap and learn how to create safety in the nervous system while we're growing, essentially, right? That's really the goal. So yeah, we've got this energy here around desire and emotional longing. So because it's connecting to gate 41, which is Pluto. So in human design, these two, the sun and moon, are connecting with Pluto. There's an intensity, even if you're not sure what the desire is. Maybe is, let me know down below, do you feel this desire? Do you know what you're moving towards? Or are you noticing the lack of energy or the lack of desire to invest in something that you're already doing? Which one is coming up more strongly for you right now? Yeah, there's an intensity, there's an emotional longing here. Um, there's a restlessness, unsure of whether you should keep going in one direction or if you need to pivot and go into another. The reassessment is the part of growth, not an evidence that something is wrong. So we tend to think we should just know. No, the reassessment itself, when done with presence, is a part of the growth process. Because once again, the shadow of gate 30 is being overly flippant, just going down every whim, every desire. Essentially, the thing I want to say the most is, do not confuse discomfort with failure right now. Discomfort is the space where, you know, when I was marketing Inner Revolution Immersion and what we're doing there, I told everyone, I'm like, if you, like, the real goal of this program, there's so many things, and I teach human design, I teach astrology in a very different way, but the goal of it for me is to learn to teach people how to sit in that discomfort, because that's the part that we miss, and then it keeps us cycling the same patterns even though we know we want to change. I want to read just a little bit about Gate 30 from Richard Rudd. This is from the Gene Key book. This is also in my book list. All of the books I read here are in my book list. So this goes from the shadow of desire to the gift of lightness. But in here, he also talks very much about how desire is not this horrible thing. I have a background in Buddhism, and often in Buddhism, desire is made to be like the suffering, the reason for suffering. But I think it's a relationship to desire that creates a lot of suffering. My gosh, as soon as I said that, I see here Richard Rudd says it's not desire itself but your reaction to it that causes suffering. So I would say I agree with that. And he says the point is that desire itself is pure, but the hexagram for hexagram 30, which is what Gene Keys and human design is partially based off of, is clinging fire. It's also known as clarity. So there's two different words there, but clinging, right? It's a clinging to desire that creates that suffering, not the desire itself. You have to come to a deep realization of your own mortality and weakness in order to realize that true strength lies in simply trusting. Very much North Node in Pisces. And I think the biggest thing for me is, a lot of people come to me and they have these big desires or these big goals, thinking that once they achieve that goal, they will be happy. And I think that is what causes a lot of suffering, is that meeting our desires is not what creates lasting peace. It really has to come from within. It's a cliche for a reason, right? But that doesn't mean that we just ignore our desires completely. And I think that's really important right now. Another thing about Aquarius that I feel like we don't often talk about is it's the sense of belonging. And right now we've got the North Node in gate 37, and we've got Venus here as well when this lunation happens. And even gate 49, these are all very tribal gates about support, about will I belong? Aquarius in the 11th house have to do about belonging in a greater sense in the world. And so there's maybe this fear of like, if I follow through with my desires, will I still belong? And here's the thing. At some point, you have to recognize that you have maybe spent your entire life exiling yourself in order to belong to others. And at some point in your life, you realize that there's another choice in which you may have to exile others in order to deeply belong to yourself. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, but what I can tell you is that Saturn and Neptune and Aries and Chiron there as well for many years now, since 2018, are showing us how self-abandonment is not going to work. And what kind of belonging do you seek if it means that you have to abandon yourself? Are those the people? Are those the communities? Are those the factions of the world that you want to belong in? Am I truly belonging if I have to sacrifice myself in order to belong? This energy can sometimes really not be present in the moment. It can really be looking for the next best thing. So, how do we stay present with our desires? How do we stay present in the body? And that's how we recognize, once again, if it's coming from a deep place rather than an impulsion to get out of something, an impulsion for freedom or something like that. So if you feel this urge to change your entire life suddenly, I actually think this eclipse is asking you to observe before you fully act on it. Notice what is arising and detach yourself from what that means about you and who you have to become. So in a lot of ways, this solar eclipse is changing who you think you are, but it's asking you to stay in this place of like, I'm not really sure yet who that is, but let me just notice this desire that's coming through and what's not working. Last but not least, I want to read the Sabian symbol. This book is also in my book list. In the description box down below, I also have ways to work with me down there, everything. So if you want to work with me, I have courses, I have one-on-ones until May, and group programs are going to be a thing as well. I'm loving this group program, Inner Revolution, and the community. Oh, just so good. So Aquarius 29 degrees, the Sabian symbol is butterfly emerging from chrysalis. The theme is metamorphosis. This symbol speaks to curiosity and to man's quest for knowledge. Oh my gosh, pause. The water bearer, Aquarius. Aquarius is also often known as a water bearer, and it confuses people because they're like, it's an air sign. But what I think is interesting to note is that Aquarius is here to disseminate knowledge, but he's not bearing books. He's bearing water. He's bearing knowledge that is essential for life, to sustain life, the wisdom and that helps us move through life. That's what Aquarian knowledge is for. The image of a butterfly emerging from chrysalis symbolizes transformation and self-renewal. At its highest, this symbol represents a delightful sense of wonderment and a childlike faith in the ultimate goodness in the world. The accent is on unfoldment. Change is in the air. Things are likely to start moving to the next stage or level in a situation. Your greatest advantage lies in being willing to let go of the safe and familiar and allow yourself to enjoy the freedom to create and experiment with new ways of living or doing things. Some of the key words here are creativity, desire for experience. Interesting that this is gate 30 as well. Curiosity, rebirth, evolution, unfoldment, freedom. So, how is this showing up for you? I'm really curious to know how this is showing up for you. And if you are thinking too much in the mind, I'll just invite you to take a deep breath right now. And notice what changes in your body when you do that. This is an air sign, after all, reminding us of the beautiful gift of breath. What's changing for you? What's not working anymore? Can you allow yourself to observe rather than immerse yourself so fully that you've lost yourself? Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time.